Hi parents, welcome. Hi, today is Parental Alienation Awareness Day, and I wanted to take the opportunity today to talk about parental alienation, the early signs and remedies dealing with parental alienation. And one of the things that we have noticed at all levels is a lack of awareness. We're talking about alienated parents that is sort of like you think about that universe where the alienated parents is in the middle, and you have the alienated child, you have the alienators, you have family and friends, the community, the workers. You look at the system, where you have the school teachers, you have mental health professionals, you have doctors, you have the court system, you have social workers. We see the lack of awareness at all levels. Now, unfortunately, that's a very big problem for you as a targeted parent, and especially for the child, because no one is aware of what it is that we are dealing with, let alone how do we handle this. And by the way, please let me know if you can hear me and where you are calling in from. If you are aware that today is Parental Alienation Awareness Day. Hi, Child Protection New Zealand. Hi, thank you so much. Yeah, so I felt like we do see that there's a lack of awareness at all levels, but really it started from you. It started from us, the targeted parents. It's so important. The thing is, unfortunately, because of such a lack of awareness at all levels and such a lack of public awareness, that targeted parents, they themselves don't realize that they are victims of this horrendous crime, basically, and form of abuse. And as a previously alienated mother, I knew what I went through. No, I should say I didn't know what I went through. I didn't realize that I was a victim of this form of abuse. And when I talk to a lot of parents, because of your experience, you feel so isolated, you feel so traumatized that you yourself don't realize that you're a victim of this form of abuse. So that's why today I wanted to talk specifically about raising your awareness. So I wanted to talk about especially early signs of parental alienation and the remedies for that. Hi, Julie. Julie testified in Colorado yesterday, and California today. That's awesome, Julie. Julie has been amazing. She's such a strong advocate. She's in the chat room for anyone who wanted to reach out. She's so experienced, absolutely amazing when it comes to understanding this. Hi, Fiona. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much. So let's talk about this early sign. And why is it so challenging for you to recognize what you are dealing with? And if you don't recognize what you are dealing with, you're not going to be able to handle it properly. And the thing with parental alienation, it doesn't just happen to be, a severe form of parental alienation immediately. It always feels like it does, but it doesn't. It started like a lot milder. It always had that early sign, and then it became a lot worse. Now, sometimes the early sign is very subtle. I would say that, and so a lot of the time parents miss it completely, and then it just felt like overnight it became the extreme form. But let's talk about the early sign. I do have a presentation, but I think I won't show that to you. I'll just talk that to you. Like I said, the first thing about parental alienation, unfortunately, is the first problem with it is that we miss the early signs, and I'm talking about you as a target parent as well as everyone else. Now, the reason for that is because of the lack of public awareness that we talk about. Another thing is that when the parents that normally are victims of being targeted tends to be parents that have had previously experienced trauma in their early childhood, or people that already have been have certain level of, like, their self-esteem have already been affected due to the past trauma, and because of that you normalize the abuse, right? So when these behaviors that the alienators are doing to you, you don't recognize that and you think this is normal, right? So victims of abuse tend to normalize abuse, and they tend to have low self-esteem, so they don't recognize that this is abuse. When other people treat them poorly, they think, well, yeah, it's just how it is, right? You normalize abuse, and because you have low self-esteem, you tend to feel like, yeah, I shouldn't speak up. This is just how it is, kind of thing. So Jennifer said my situation is pretty agonizing, bleeding into my family and friends. I'm so sorry. You said worse, so I'm going to assume that you have overcame the situation, Jennifer, or are you still dealing with it right now? Okay, so that's another thing. Now the next thing is, for a lot of target parents or for a lot of victims of abuse in general, is that you trying to, when you see all these violating behaviors, you're trying to appease the abuser, hoping that this is going to help, right? So, for example, when the alienator, we see this a lot, when the alienator, for example, putting unreasonable requests, like, it's your time to have your children according to the court order, and the alienator just refused, and or maybe coming up with some excuse like, oh, today is my mother's birthday, so I won't send the kids over, I'm going to keep the kids, etc. Like that kind of behaviors, where your rights are being violated. A lot of the time, parents, alienated parents, targeted parents tend to feel like, oh, yeah, it's small enough that I should not speak up, because if I speak up, she's gonna or he's gonna throw tantrum or being a lot worse, and then I'm gonna be in a worse situation. So trying to appease the abuser and hoping that this is gonna help. Unfortunately, you are dealing with an abusive type of person, so that only aggravate the situation a lot more, because you are now giving them the chance to see that you are going to give in. So then they're just going to push it further. So that's another problem. And then there's a true lack of power. There's a power imbalance in your relationship with the perpetrator, right, with the abuser. There's a true lack of balance. Now, it could be because of, maybe financial resources, like maybe the abuser is a lot more powerful, through the connection, a lot of more money. Maybe you have been isolated from, and this is very common because abuser tends to abuse you not just in the form of parental alienation. That kind of abusive people will already have probably have already abused you emotionally. So they probably already isolated you from friends and family, things like that. So, there's a power imbalance in that you don't have a support network and they do, things like that. Right? There's so many other reasons why, but one of the features that we see very common in the relationship between the alienator and the target parents is there's a power imbalance. So you are lack of power and they feel like they can get away with it. Hi, Victoria. Victoria is from Australia. Thank you so much for being here. And if you guys could please help me share this to other groups that you are in, to your Facebook, to other people. I know I didn't schedule this in advance, so this is sort of a surprise for everyone. But anyway, so let's continue. So, and then obviously we talk about, because when you lack of the support and lack of resources, it becomes very easy for you to miss the early signs. So the biggest thing, the very first thing, when it comes to the situation that we have, is the missing of the early signs. Now I saw Titaha said, and I'm sorry I butchered your name. I'm pretty sure I butchered your name because I don't really know how to pronounce it. She said, we did absolutely nothing wrong, but CPS worked with children's hospital to murder my little boy and alienated me from my family, and then my beautiful partner died of heart failure after being made to take the vaccine, and they made it impossible for me to continue my career as an ambulance officer, so I lost everything. Whoa, that is such a tragic situation. Wow, I'm so sorry. That's crazy situation. Now, we see a lot of the time where CPS and mental health professional and doctors and teachers participate in that whole campaign of abusing children. Some of it is to do with corruption, but actually a lot of it is not corruption. It's a simple incompetence, the lack of awareness, the lack of training, the lack of just that whole thing that pack it together instead of a lot of the time it's actually not corruption. It does happen sometimes, but it's just this whole package of lack of information, lack of awareness, lack of training, lack of and being incompetence and being, or sometimes they're trying to do the right thing and they bought into the narrative that is false, and so they participate along with the abuse, unfortunately. Hi Lars, thank you so much for being here. Lars is from Sweden. We got Dingo said, would it be too much to ask how target parents are actually supposed to obtain and afford an attorney, like Mr. Joshi or an expert like Ms. Hammond or Ms. Baker? I watched video after video and seem to understand the five-factor model, alienating behaviors and of the alienators and behavior manifestation of the children far better than the therapists, attorneys, and other professionals working on my case, who unsurprisingly can't even acknowledge the problem due to their counterintuitive thinking. How does the target parents actually use your very informative videos to make the abuse stop? Thank you. Okay, Dina, or Dingo, I am so sorry. And I hope that I pronounce it right. I don't actually know how to pronounce your name, but I agree. This is a very big problem, is that it's so prohibitively expensive for parents to be able to afford these people and be able to build the team that you need. But this is the exact reason why I interview them, so that they share their information publicly for free, so that you can have it. And this is why I have a workbook on Amazon. You guys can find it, the five-factor model, how to diagnose parental alienation workbook. And the reason is because, and I talk about this all the time, you have to be in the driver's seat. You have to be in the driver's seat. So if you can't afford a lawyer, you can't afford the expert witness, you yourself have to structure your case in a way that is presentable to the court, so that you can fight it, or to the CPS if you are in that situation, with social worker or whoever that you have to deal with. And that's why we provide whatever that you could, like flyers, so that you can print it out and send, give it to your school, like your child's school teacher and things like that. Yeah, it is a very, very bad situation. I'm not going to deny it. It's absolutely horrendous. It's so unfair and it's so challenging for parents that are victims of this form of abuse. I'm not going to even try to say it's, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Unfortunately, it's very, very expensive for parents, whether you use the people that I interview or you use other people. I really don't have an answer for that. So the only answer that I have for you is truly get educated, get empowered, build our team, whether that's you and a support network, or whether it's some other lawyers that you could afford, but using your power and your information to build your case and drive your case, so that even if you don't have a true expert in your team, you can still drive the case in a way that is still effective. I hope that helped. Okay, so continue with our talk about early signs and remedies. So before we talk about the actual situation of alienation, some of the predictors of the potential abuser, like for you to recognize who you are dealing with, is to look at the alienator and see if this alienator had been a victim of parental alienation themselves. So if they were an alienated child, they have a pathological enmeshment with their parent, they have rejected one of their parents and things like that. And any form of past trauma, right? People with past trauma tend to become either an abuser or repeated victims, unfortunately. This is, studies have shown that. So if you look at the partners that you have, or the other parent of the child, or the people involved around the child, if you recognize these predictors in them, that's the first place that you should look to see if you could potentially become the victim, or if they could potentially become the abuser. Okay, and obviously, I talk about the power imbalance. So you can start recognize the power imbalance in the relationship before things break down, right? Before the divorce, before the separation, you have already recognized the power imbalance. So if you see that, that's the potential predictor for an abuser of parental alienation. That they are likely, or they are more likely to become an alienator, right? So you wanted to look at that. And then you see behaviors like demand and control, right? Where they are being unreasonable and they wanted to control you, they wanted to control the child. They undermine your power with your child, right? And then you look at gaslighting, where you know the fact, where you know a certain fact, and then they're trying to talk you out of it and trying to tell you that that's not what it is, right? Things like that. So you already seen narcissistic behaviors, you already seen that kind of sign for abusive, toxic behaviors. And then you also start to, if you look for their attempt to isolate you or isolate the child. And when you see that, that's also a predictor for potential alienator. And then you start to see maybe behaviors where they bad mouthing to others about you. And when they try to, when the conversation between you and that person is more about them winning than them trying to connect with you, right? Then you see that those type of people, those are predictors of a potential alienator. Okay, thing is that I can't get an attorney to even open to understanding the concept, but I sincerely appreciate your response. It's like the impossible is expected of target parents who are already trying to navigate through an impossible situation. Dingo, I totally understand. And I will tell you that I did not get an attorney who understands my situation. As a previously target mother, I will tell you, my attorney did not at all understand what parental alienation was. I was completely brand new at parental alienation, so I would say that I myself didn't really understand it. But I would say, obviously, there's a lot of luck and everything as well. But I did, within a very short time, sort of really studying, right? Cram myself in about parental alienation, really trying to read as much as I could, and putting my foot down really quickly. And this is why I want to talk today about these early signs and the remedies. So let's continue with this. And yes, I'm really sorry, but you unfortunately can't hand your case over and be able to trust somebody else to truly take care of you and your child. And that's a very unfortunate situation when you already have to deal with the abuse and you already the victim and you already suffer. And talking about like the kind of suffering, the kind of the impossible situation that you're talking about. I actually have a slide. I think I should share it. I have shared before, and I do want to share it. Let's just go back to that slide that I have, because I really think and I did talk about this slide sometime in other, but talking about the impossible situation for target parents. Let's see this one. Okay, for the situation that target parents is in, it's a systematic multi-level attack on the target parents. So you see the target parents right in the middle, right? And there's a whole lot of things that are happening, and everybody basically is attacking the target parent. So you're looking at the alienator. Now the alienator will denigrate you, gaslight you, and sometimes have direct violent behavior against you, right? And then they themselves bad mouthing and create false allegation and threats to your community, whether your family, friends, workplace, church, that kind of thing, right? And then at the same time, they use a loyalty conflict to to entice the child, to pull the child away from you, to create that pathological enmeshment between the child and themselves, to get the child to reject you, to get the child to spy on you, to get the child to create false allegations or participate in the false allegations against you, right? And sometimes they even use abduction or interference with your child custody rights, right? So these are all these things that alienators do to you directly, and alienators also doing to you indirectly through the communities and through the child. And then they also use the system, right? They use the system to block your access, to create fake documents, to have perjury, to have false allegation, to have frivolous lawsuit, to violate the court orders. Right? They have all these different indirect alienating behaviors, right? And then in return, you got the child now reject you, try to spy on you, doing all sort of things, participate in false allegations against you, believe in the alienators instead of you, and then having all this false memory or distorted memories, right? And then you have the community of people that falls for this narrative, this false narrative. So you have family and friends that actually reject you. It's really unfortunate, and we have seen alienated parents that have family and friends that participate along with the alienators and choose the alienator instead of you, right? So then they turn around, they themselves reject you. And then if you talk about workplace, sometimes you lost a job because of the false allegation or denigration or bad mouthing, right? And then obviously there's spying and gaslighting and, flying monkeys type of behaviors, right? And then you have the system. The system is terrible. I mean, we had someone to talk about the CPS just now. You have school, you have teachers, you have doctors, you have court. This whole system, on top of the corruption, on top of potential, misunderstanding and complete lack of competency and responsibility, they also fall for the false narrative, and the lack of awareness push them, and the counterintuitive thinking that I think Dingo just mentioned about. They also participate in this, so then they create punishment for target parents through either reduction of parenting time or legal costs and etc. Right? So you look at the target parent in the middle, you are subjected to the systematic multi-level attack on you. So I understand it's so challenging, and how do you break free from that and be able to rescue your child and protect yourself and hopefully build your own community? It's so important. Now, talking about the child, why it's so difficult for the child. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, where Dr. Vanderkolk talks about trauma and things like that. And one of the studies I thought was really interesting was about children with trauma. So one of the tests that they did, I think in the 70s at one of the children clinic, was they had these photos. They show photos that are very innocuous, right? So very basic everyday life photos. So for example, they show a photo of a father, sort of half under the car trying to repair the car, and two children standing near him, both smiling at him, right? They all look at each other smiling very happily, and the father is in the middle of repairing their vehicle. And so when they show this picture to normal children, right, they go in and they try to do the study, and they try to compare traumatized children with other children, and they show this, these very simple normal pictures, very innocuous pictures. And normal children would look at that and they ask the children, what do you see here? And where do you see it came from and where it's going? Children would look at it and say, the normal children said, yeah, the father is teaching the children how to repair the cars, and they're gonna fix the car, and then they're gonna go to McDonald's and get French fries and maybe ice cream and things like that, right? Happy time, right? Basic happy time, because the picture had these children smiling at their father and things like that. When they show the same exact innocuous picture to traumatized children, you see all sort of crazy stories. You see children that look at it and said, one of the child's going to grab the hammer and smash the father's head, and blood is going to splash everywhere, right? Some other children look at it and said, one of the child's going to pull the jackhammer out, so the car is going to crash on the father, and the father is going to be like all mangled up, and again, blood's everywhere, right? So traumatized children look at the same thing as normal children, and they don't see the same thing. They see horrible things. Now, this is important because your children, it's so important for you to recognize that your children are not normal children. They are traumatized children. They are abused children. So when they look at things, they are not seeing things the way that you think they should see or other normal children see. And so their behavior and their response to your action or to situation toward you is traumatized behavior, trauma response, right? It's not normal behavior. So it's so important for you to recognize this. Okay, see, Jennifer said she's still hyper vigilant. And her son is 13 now. He was used, manipulated, love bombed, interrogated, and from the golden child to the scapegoat, turning against me, against his sister. All he's seen is mom taking all the responsibility and accountability, treated poorly, even by law enforcement. He's very narcissistic, verbally abusive. I think you're talking about the abuser, the alienator. The psychopath is prevailing, no empathy, experimenting with drugs and crime. Our relationship is crushed. Oh, you're talking about your child. Yeah, and that's a problem, right? Like we just talked about the alienated child. It's an abused child. It's a traumatized child. So this child, because of what had impacted them in their life, and sometimes you, as a teleparent, don't even recognize that alienation is abuse. It's child abuse. It impacts the child so seriously. And so, yeah, so then a lot of parents will see their child getting into completely wrong path. You know, there's a conversation here about, you know, your children trying drugs and crimes and things like that. Well, so your relationship with your daughter is silver, no contact for 2 years, never seen her more than a weekend, separated before, and then things still happen. 9 fraudulent CPS investigation. And that's the thing, right? You see alienators completely abuse the system. And we see this a lot where it's like you end up with just non-stop, one after, just this avalanche of false allegation and litigation, and it's just exhausting. So you're already dealing with losing the relationship with your children, which is really painful. And then on top of that, you've got all this that you have to deal with. And I see Maritska said, the lawyer works on your instruction. And you can organize for Ashish Joshi to talk to them, or an expert in parental alienation to talk to them. Yeah, Mariska, and I agree with her, which is, yeah, you have to be in the driver's seat, and your lawyer works for you. So even if you can't afford a lawyer that is truly an expert in parental alienation, you have to get so educated, be in the driver's seat, and drive your case, whether it's through your lawyer or whether it's through whatever, right? And Mariska said, my situation keeps getting worse, severe abuse, and it's breaking me and affecting my two non-alienated children. Yeah, I'm going to talk more about this a bit later, but I hear you. We see this a lot, because it's just like if you're not able to stop it quickly, and if you're not able to reverse it quickly and create measures to slow things down, it's a very fast down the hill situation. It just really drastic, and it's never stopped, unfortunately. Okay, let's continue with our conversation. So I talk about the predictors when you look at someone that could potentially become an alienator, right? So, and I talk about you as a teleparent, how you potentially could become a subject or victim of parental alienation as a teleparent, right? So now let's talk about the behaviors of the alienators. This is a bit easier because I think everyone has seen this. you've seen bad mouthing, you've seen limiting access, interfering with your access to your children, you see them undermining your children's trust, right? So for example, and this could happen way before the separation or the divorce with the alienator, right? You could see that, let's say, the child is, there's some kind of decision, and you try to make a decision. Let's say you say, okay, make sure you have dinner before you have dessert. Let's not have ice cream until after you have dinner, right? And the alienator will jump in and say, no, you go ahead and have ice cream, right? What it does is it undermines your authority and undermine your trust in front of the child, saying, you don't have to listen to your mother or father. I'm going to override that authority, and you don't have to trust them, you don't have to look up to them, and just go ahead and violate their authority as a parent, right? So you see this kind of behavior. Like I said, the example that I gave about the ice cream is a mild form of that behavior, but you see it just escalate into a bigger set of problems, right? And then you also see behavior that undermines the love between you and your children. So, either obviously bad mouthing, but there's also things like, I heard stories of parents, like let's say Christmas time, because like I said, this is the kind of things that happen way before the divorce or separation. So you guys could still be married, and it's Christmas time, and they will get the children to open the present before you get to be there. So you might have been putting a lot of effort in to prepare Christmas present for your children, and yet the children doesn't see that this is your love to them. The children will, because they undermine this love, right? So things like that. So you start to see the alienating behaviors. I'm talking about early signs because the early signs are actually harder to recognize. When it's a full blown, then obviously it's easier for you to recognize, and by that time it's sort of like kind of late, right? Okay, so we talk about the predictors for the alienators. We talk about you, how you likely becoming the victim. We talk about the child psychology. We talk about the early sign of, in terms of the alienating behaviors. So let's talk about the early sign for the children. Now, earlier someone mentioned about the 8 manifestation, like in children behaviors. Now those are, by that time, it's kind of really late, right? By the time you've got a full-on parental alienation situation, the 8 manifestation behaviors, has, completely sided with the alienators, etc., completely rejecting you, etc., like have no remorse in their behaviors, in how they treat you, etc., etc. But those are the late sign. Let's talk about the early sign. You can actually start seeing the early sign, and this thing I actually call it the freeze-thaw cycle of children that are subjected to parental alienation. And the freeze-thaw cycle, and let me explain. The freeze-thaw cycle is the early sign is in that during the early period or the early stage of parental alienation, you could pick up the child, and when you first have your child, like in your custody time, you see the child is kind of cold and a little bit sort of hesitant and sort of defiant and things like that, right? But if you have your child for a while, let's say for a weekend or something like that, once the child is away from the alienator, you started to see the child warm up to you. The child becomes their normal self, loving and, authentic and things like that, right? And then when it comes close to the time to return the child to the alienator, because you're now the end of your custody time, you started to see the child kind of freeze up, start to behave a bit colder to you, start to, etc., right? So this is why I call it the freeze-thaw cycle, because anytime the child started to go to the other side, the child freeze up to you, they become defiant and rude and cold and that kind of thing. And then when you get the child back and you give it enough time, the child will thaw out and warm up to you, right? So this is the early stage because the child is not fully damaged yet, not fully affected yet, it's not severe yet. So you can still warm the child up when there's enough time. Now, if you don't do something in time, it will become a full-on freeze cycle, right? There's no thaw at all. So it's very early to recognize that at that point, when you're in the freeze-thaw cycle period. Now, one of the biggest things is that target parents at that point don't recognize that. They don't recognize that they are target of parental alienation. They've seen alienating behaviors, but yet they don't see it. They see the bad mouthing, they see the child acting in this freeze thaw cycle, but they don't realize this whole package that they are now, being a target of parental alienation. So when they miss that, what they do is when the child is cold and defiant, what they do is they react to it, right? So when the child's kind of rude, they scream at the child, maybe they punish the child, they etc., right? So that's the biggest problem. And what does it do? When you don't recognize that this child behavior is a subject of the alienating behaviors, and you punish the child for it, what the child does, all it is the child is a victim, and yet you punish this child, you respond to this child incorrectly, it will then enforce the message from the alienator that you are a bad parent, that you are cold, that you are tough, that you are not loving. And truly, your response when the child misbehaves and your response in that manner, it does show it's actually truly is that because you don't understand, and so you're not being able to show your empathy, show your love, and so the child will not be able to appreciate from you who you are. And now the child is actually become more trusting of the false narrative. And sometimes the parents will do these different things. So like, for example, one of the biggest trigger is, say, oh, if you misbehave like that, I'm going to take the phone away, for example, right? Because you start seeing the child like constantly texting the other parents or whatever. And then you take the phone away, and then that became the full-on trigger of alienation. The child then took up and to go, I never see you again, right? And that's a problem. That's the biggest thing is if you start seeing sign of the freeze-thaw cycle, if you could wake up at that point and go, okay, this is the early signs of parental alienation, and recognize that my child is a victim, then there's a whole lot of things that you could do instead of just responding to misbehavior. Then you could save it. And I'm going to talk about what you can do during that time in a little bit. So the biggest thing I want to emphasize is it's so important for you to watch for the signs of the freeze-thaw cycle and respond properly, appropriately, instead of seeing that a child is defiant and cold and rude and punish the child. Because when you do that, you destroy any little sort of like thread of connection left that you have with the child, and so you make it a lot worse. Because you can't blame a victim for they are the victim. The child, that's all the child know. And I just talked to you guys about how a traumatized child look at a very innocuous picture and completely misread it into something else. Right? Hi, Claudia. Thank you so much for being here. Claudia said we need to learn to remain calm and not react. It's so difficult, and yes, exactly that's what we need to do. Is how do we stay not trigger ourselves, right? To recognize these signs and go, we need to stay calm and not respond, not let our body and our face, to react and show this. Okay, Mariska said, unfortunately, none of us recognize the early signs, and most of us had even heard of the term parental alienation. I agree, absolutely, I agree, and that's a problem, right? Because there's this broad stroke of lack of public awareness, and then usually you are the victim, so you're being isolated. So it's very difficult for you to recognize it, and this is exactly why I'm talking about it today, because I'm hoping that some parents will see this, parents that are still in early stage can see this and be able to prevent it from getting worse. Or I'm hoping that somebody recognizes sign in something in their family and be able to talk to them, maybe their brother or sister, and go, hey, look at this. What you are dealing with is the early signs of parental alienation. recognize this and this is what you should do. That's the point of this conversation. Is today is Parental Alienation Awareness Day. Let's raise awareness, and the first place is let's raise the awareness of the target parents. We need to change that first. If we, we have to be the change ourselves before we could expect everyone around to change, right? So, and that's why this conversation. But I agree with you. Unfortunately, like a lot of the time, parents have no idea what they're dealing with until it's so late. It's deep into it, right? Okay, so now let's talk about remedies. Now we'll talk about the early signs. Let's talk about the remedies. What do we see here? Okay, I see a conversation where Jennifer mentioned that they counter everything. Yeah, parental alienation is very counterintuitive, and it's very common where you see, a parent that's dealing with a child that is showing early sign of parental alienation, and other people will say, "Oh, they're just going through the teenager year. That's just teenagers. They're gonna be fine or whatever, right? Oh, that's normal, right? Things like that. Sort of normalize the abuse and trying to trivialize what you are experiencing. And if you ignore, because they trivialize this, and if you ignore it, it's just gonna get worse, right? And that's a problem. And then Jennifer said, yes, undermining everything and blatant competition for nothing, really. Yeah, I agree. Because, yeah, you see this very early on. You already see that the alienator doing stuff to your children way before the separation of the divorce. And then, what do we see? I'm so sorry. Let me turn the fan on. It's so hot. Okay, so, and what do I see? I know I missed a bunch of questions and comment. Yeah, things scrolling through so fast, I kind of not seeing it. Okay, Mariska said one of the early signs is also creating dependency on the alienating parent, especially for money. They create the same dependency in the child when they alienated and left the target parents without the resources to fight. Yeah, and this happened a lot, right? Where one parent is, and usually, unfortunately, the alienator have more resources, financial resources, and not just financial resources. We see that's why it creates this power imbalance, right? So you create and especially you have the toxic relationship where maybe they're not allowing you to work, like this is before the divorce or before the separation, so you depend on them financially. So then and then they isolate you from your network of support, your parents and your family. So now you depend on them financially, and then of course you have that kind of situation. Totally. Okay. Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for being here. Where are you calling in from? Now, I saw Jennifer said, I did not discipline my kids. I knew exactly what was happening. Both of my kids are on IDP. I'm not sure what that is. I've advocated for them for years, and I've reached out to community resources that we have been to different programs, and they fail us. Candidly, all I could do is love my kids, just love on them. I think for me, I did too much of that, and unfortunately, my environment never changed. The environment that was keeping us sick didn't help at all. The infiltration of other family members and other authority figures, and I failed to discipline at all because I felt so guilty and then hopeless at the same time. I felt so bad. It's how my relationship with my son is just past 10 years on it, really. I'm so sorry. So yeah, we're going to talk about that a bit as well, Jennifer. Is that there's a boundary that you have to set. So you see this behavior in your children, you can't just react to it, but at the same time you can't let it go out of control, right? So it's a fine balance. Okay, now before we talk about what to do with the children, let's talk about the first place is let's talk about remedies now. Let's talk about first place. It's actually yourself. Now, as soon as you recognize these signs and you see that you are a target of parental alienation and that your children are target victim of being alienated, you have to do a whole lot of things for yourself first. Because as soon as you can, you need to build this, what would be the right term for it? This fortress around yourself. Rael said, hi, 1 year ago today, I met you after putting up a fight in the museum step. What a year. Very grateful for all you do. Rael, you're amazing. I'm so grateful for you, Rael. It's just amazing. It's been incredible. I'm so grateful for what you have done. I'm so grateful that we know each other. I love working with you, really, and I'm so grateful for you for what you are doing for other parents now that you step up and become such an incredible advocate. So thank you so much for being here. And other parents, Rael and Claudia in the chat room. I saw Julie earlier in the chat room. Like, those are the people that are there in the battle every day. Please reach out to them. They are incredible, and that's the people that you need in your support network. Please do reach out to them. So anyway, so now the first step in terms of remedies is take care of yourself. So when you see this sign, you need to focus, because like I said, because you used to be a victim, you normalize the abuse, it affects your self-esteem, you don't feel like you could speak up, you try to appease to the alienated, to the abuser, hoping that things would help. You either respond aggressively to your child, or you appease your child and let the child sort of completely violate the boundary of, discipline and respect and things like that, right? So the first place is actually go back to yourself and go, what are the self-cares that I need? And the thing about self-awareness is it's very difficult to see yourself. Now, it's very difficult. So what you need is you need a good mirror. And what that mirror is the community around you. Now, if you have the wrong kind of community, like the example that we talk about, where you have other people in your family and say, well, that's just normal, that's just whatever, right? Like, let's say if your ex-husband or your ex-wife does something, have some kind of alienating behaviors, and then your family said, oh, that's just how he is, or that's just how she is, right? It normalizes abuse. So you have the wrong kind of network. So the first place is to build that mirror so you can look at yourself, so you can rebuild your self-esteem, is to build the right network. So, and a lot of the time, because parental alienation is so counterintuitive, it's so difficult to recognize, you need the people that truly understand this. So instead of trying to count on your normal family and friends, you need to go and reach out and build a different kind of network that is specifically for this situation. And this is why I point out the people in the chat room, those advocates, the community that right now here in this chat room, the community that we have in our different Facebook groups. So we have a number of Facebook groups. If you look into Victim to Hero Facebook page, you will see a number of different groups that you can participate in. Like, that's your community. You need to reach out to those people. Why? Because they've been through this, they understand it, they have experience that they can share with you so that you don't make the same mistakes. They can share resources, things like that, right? And so that's very important. The first place is, how do you build a mirror that is true reflection that help you have self-awareness and be able to look at it and say, no, I didn't do something wrong. I am entitled to this, and I should be doing this, and this is the right behavior, this is the right response, and that's not appropriate, that kind of things, right? So that is so important. Mara said, yes, our parental alienation community is our family and support. Exactly. You need this community. So don't just count on your normal family and friends. Very often, because it's so counterintuitive, what they are going to say to you is not helpful to you. In fact, they're going to make things worse. So unless the thing about parental alienation is, if you haven't gone through it, it's so difficult for you to relate. It's not a relatable problem. And so it's very difficult for people. So the first place in terms of remedies is yourself, like the self-care, the rebuilding around you, the support network. And then the next thing is education, right? I talk about education a lot. Education, education, education. What is education? Education is going in and watch interviews that I've done with other experts, going into other places. There are amazing books, that talking about the subject. It doesn't have to just be about parental alienation. You could read about therapeutic parenting. You can read about different kind of things. You can read about trauma. You can read about different psychology, different things like that. There's a lot of resources out there. The point is, the more awareness you can build for yourself, the better it will be. So remedies, the first step is in yourself. And what you are going through, like I was showing you guys earlier about how it is a multi-level systematic attack on you, I understand it's very challenging, very difficult. And so it's even more important for you to build that support network and have self-care, because if you don't, it's beyond your control. You're going to respond in a way that are not productive for you. So yeah, Mara said, the more we surround ourselves with our parental alienation community, the more strength and empower. Exactly, right? So self-care is very important. And the first thing about self-care is self-awareness. And the first thing about self-awareness is having the right mirror around you. And this is going back to the community and support, right? So be able to detach from certain things, be able to be, and this is another thing too, is guilt. A lot of the time, target parents will blame themselves. Maybe they made a mistake by, taking the phone away, and then now the child refused to talk to you. And then you carry this guilt and say, I wish I had been what X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. Like, oh, I wish if I did something else, and then things would have been different. No, you're dealing with a toxic environment with a perpetrator, an intentional perpetrator of abuse against you, and then you're doing the best that you could. So carrying this guilt doesn't do anything to help your situation. It creates a lot of stress hormone in your system, so that you suffer physically, because it will manifest into physical condition, like your physical health will suffer on top of your mental health that's going to suffer. So, all of this is very challenging. So self-care is so important, is to let go of guilt, allowing yourself to be who you are, to recognize that you're doing your best, and build a support system around you, so that when you forget who you are, and who you are is a loving parent who is so desperate to do what is best for your children, who is so desperate to protect your children. You are amazing. So if you can recognize that, if you can remind yourself of that, it's so important. So if you can build a support network around you, so that when you forget who you are, when you forget how strong you are, you're much stronger than you realize. So when you forget, at least the people in your support network can help remind you of who you are, can help empower you. So Rael said, great point, you have to know you are out of regulation. So you know to do something to get yourself centered again. Yeah, right? Because when you are so tense, you're not going to be able to respond to anything appropriately. And sometimes you might look at things and that's the thing too, right? It creates this bias that alienators do something, you immediately think that is an attack. And sometimes it may not be. Maybe something the alienator does, they're human. So a lot of the things might be really abusive, but something might be just normal and reasonable. But if you are out of regulation, everything you look at, you think that that's attack. So then if you not respond appropriately, it make things worse, right? So there's that. Okay. So yeah, building your support network, self-education, so that you learn about parenting, therapeutic parenting, you do self-care, things like that. All those are important. Okay, let me figure out where my slides is. And okay, another thing is about hope, right? So important for you to hold on to that hope. That's like everything. That's the most important thing, because if you give up hope, you will never be able to do things in the way that you never feel empowered enough to do what you could do to help you and your children, right? So to never let go of the hope. And and you can accept the reality of whatever it is, right? While still not giving up hope, and that's so important. So those are the self-care things. The other thing too is to focus on forward instead of keep looking at the past and carry the guilt, carry the regrets, and keep rehashing the past. That's something that I also see a lot for victims is they keep going back to the past and not being able to focus on going forward. And then parents give up hope and go, I have no hope in the future. And so when you give up hope, you're not doing anything, and that doesn't help either. So the first step, I said, is focusing around you, is building your network, your support network, self-awareness, self-education, be kind to yourself, self-care, look at your health, watch your diet, watch your exercise, watch your sleep hour, look at your other aspect of your life, because if you don't, a lot of the time parents will give up everything else. They don't, for example, they don't go and enjoy music. They forget that they enjoy art, for example. They forget that they cook and experimenting with different aspects of life that is enjoyable. If you forget all of that, it's going to affect you. So don't just give up your life altogether. Definitely watch for all these things. Okay, so that's the first thing, is self-care. Now the next thing, let's talk about what to do with your children. Now, because we're talking about early stage, you still hopefully still have contact, you still, your children started to show sign of alienation, but you still have your children, you still have interaction, things like that. So there are 3 keys in your interaction with your children, and I'm going to talk about the principle, and I'm going to talk about the specific. The first thing is to be able to show this constant grow up yourself as the loving, available parent. So it's a parent-child relationship. That the first thing is to show you as a loving, safe, available parent. Loving, safe, available. So that's the first principle. The second principle is how to build and rebuild the bonding. Now, a lot of the time we will see target parents say, we were so close, we were best friends, me and my son or my daughter, we were best friends, and how could they undermine this? So you had a history that is good. So how do we rebuild that? How do we remind the children this and rebuild your relationship, and how to build it from here, right? So that's second principle. The third principle is to do with, I'm going blank right now. I'm so sorry. Let me just make sure I say that. Oh, yeah. Third principle is to teach your child critical thinking and empathy, right? So that's about skills in the child. It's about you. It's about your relationship with your child and the skill in the child. So 3 principles. The first one is showing that you are a safe, loving, available parent. The second thing is to talk about the bonding between you and the child. And the third thing is about teaching your child critical thinking and empathy. Okay, so let's talk about the first thing. Now, if you are a safe, loving, and available parent, what does it mean? That means that you need to be safe, loving, and available. That means that you don't react and you don't create responses to your child behavior in a way that shows that you are abusive, that you are unsafe, right? So that's the first thing. So learning parenting skill where you can respond to your child calmly and yet firmly is very important. So safe, loving. Now, there are different tools. So for example, the 5 love languages, right? Things like that. There's different tools where you can express your love. Now, a lot of it depends on the culture, depends on different things that people express love differently. So there's people that will never hug their children, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just their culture, right? And then there's people that hug their children, kiss their children all the time. So it depends on your culture, but whatever it is, there's a way that you can express your love. So you have to go out of your way to work on this. You have to be conscious about your effort to show that you are a safe, loving, and available children. Now, there's a study by I apologize, I forgot his name. I actually interviewed him about emotional security in a child. If you guys look into the videos tab in the Victim to Hero Facebook page, you will find an interview, and I'm so sorry, I'm just going blank right now. There's a doctor, I forgot, he's in Arizona, I think Arizona State University. He did a research for like 20 years into emotional security in a child. And he found that your responsiveness to the child and your time with the child, like the actual time, is so important. So what does it mean? Put your foot down when the other parent or the alienator trying to interfere or trying to withhold the child from you. Really put your foot down and make sure you get all the time that you can. And when you do have your children, don't spend the time on the phone, don't get distracted. Do your best to truly physically spend time with your children and be responsive to your children. Meaning if your children talk about anything, right? Sad thing or happy thing, you need to be there to be responsive, because your child needs to know that you are available and you're responsive to them. And that creates the emotional security between the child and you. So definitely look into that study. Like I interviewed him for like 2 hours or something like that. So showing that you are a safe, loving, and available parent is so important. And that takes conscious effort and time. And don't let the alienator violating your time, because a lot of the time parents will go, well, my son or my daughter said they don't want to go over today, so I don't want to, I don't want to disagree, so you know what, okay, fine. You started with this little giving in, they will take so much more from you. So if you can put your foot down and really hold on to whatever the time that you have, and physically be there, be responsive, be available, and not react, and learn about love languages, learn about therapeutic parenting. All of those are skills that you can then apply and be able to show those things. Okay, so that's the first thing. But the second thing is about the bonding between you and the child. Now, part of it is what I just talked about, emotional security and responsiveness to your child. That's one thing. The other thing is, like, a lot of the time you had a good relationship with your child. Now, so how do you and what I call memory refresher is that going through this process, the alienator will go and try to rewrite the history. The alienator will try to distort the child memory and create false narrative about you. So they will say, oh, for example, you were never available, or you were rude to the child, or you were, you abandoned the child, create all these different stories, right? So how do you, you need to help your child memories by using these things that I call memory refreshers. So you look at different photos in the past, so you look at all the sensory, right? So you think of smell, touch, taste, color, things like that, right? So you look at all these things and you look at the past. And so, for example, you took your child for camping. So trying to remind the child through all these sensory things, right? So talk about, oh, that smells nice. It reminds me of the time you and I took you camping. Do you remember, the campfire has that warm smell, right? So you're trying to trigger all these sensory things to re-trigger the memories in the child, so that they can refresh their memory in the bonding with you, with the loving with you, right? You could talk about color. Remember the vibrant color of whatever it is, right? So look at your history, and every interaction with your child, you're trying to really look at all these different sensory, so that you can build more bonding, but you can also use that to remind them of the past, so that it can help re-strengthen the relationship between you and the child. And that's the thing, is to recognize that human psychology is not just you talking to the child. It's all different aspects, right? The touch. Remember how, the blanket was really soft, or the water was really cold, right? So that's all the touch sensory. You talk about the smell, you talk about the taste. Remember something was really spicy, something was really sour, right? You're talking about the sound. Remember that was really beautiful music, or that was really loud, or that was whatever abilities, right? So you think of all these different things, and this takes deliberate effort. You actually have to put effort in to build this. So the first aspect, like I said, is to show that you are a safe, loving, available parent. The second thing is about the bonding and focusing on memory building and memory refresher. The third thing is about teaching your child critical thinking and empathy. And this is a lot, because now you have to look at and trying to teach your child these skills that that you normally have. So instead of in your interaction with your child, instead of like saying, like, let's say if your child brought up something, instead of you providing your commentary to what the child said, you try to trigger curiosity. So for example, the child talk about something, you could ask, so what do you think caused this? So what do you think that person think? So what do you think, where does this go, right? You wanted to trigger thinking in the child. Do you think there's a situation where this is wrong? Do you think this is right? Why is it wrong? Why is this right? Right? You want to trigger critical thinking. And the biggest thing about critical thinking is asking questions, about curiosity. Because if the child says something and you just say, no, it should be X, Y, and Z, right? You don't trigger the curiosity. You don't make the child think. You don't help the child with that critical thinking. And you simply just enforcing your power and authority, and very soon that is going to be taken away anyway. So that doesn't help. You have to empower the child to think themselves, so that even when alienation happens and you've been taken away out of the equation, you're being removed, the child has their own critical thinking, so that they themselves recognize the situation, and then that can help you, right? So critical thinking is very important. And empathy, like I said, is the same thing. It's about relating to other people. So asking question about, what do you think that person feel? Why do they do things that way, right? So putting the child into other people's shoes, so that they can recognize what does it take, and force the child to get into that behavior, that habit of thinking about different things just beyond themselves. That way, hopefully, they can, when they're in the situation, or when the alienators create false narrative, the child can start asking questions in themselves. So always asking questions, like that's the biggest thing when it comes to critical thinking, and always trying to question things in both sides, right? Okay, you saw things this way. Do you think that's wrong? Do you think that's right? Why is it wrong, and why is it right? In what situation is it right? In what situation is it wrong, right? So always empower your child into thinking, right? So those are the key three things. Like I said, the first thing is putting conscious effort in to show that you are a safe, loving, available parent. The second thing is strengthening your bond with your child by, building memory, showing love expression, appropriate love expression. Now, for people that haven't read the book of the 5 love languages, definitely recommend it, because it doesn't matter whether you have any kind of cultural background, or whether you have different, like, for example, religious background. We each have certain type of preference, right? So the love languages talk about, some people praises are more important to them. Some people, actions are more important to them. Some people, gifts are more important to them. Some people, spending time is more important to them. So you can understand what is important to your child, so that you can express your love to the child in the way that the child can appreciate it. And that's why it's important for you to look into that kind of things. So yeah, strengthening the bond and help the child remember the memories between you and the child, so that you can prevent the alienator from distorting the memories and create false memory about you, right? So, looking at all the sensory, smell, touch, taste, sound, etc., right? And then the third thing, like I said, is building critical thinking in your child and empathy. So, get the child to motivate the child and empower the child to think, to ask questions, to think in other people's shoes and things like that. So anyway, there's more to this, but I'm going to stop for now, because I'm physically actually a little bit tired. So I know there's more questions in the chat room. please feel free to post more questions. I will try to visit it again and address it. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna go. But thank you so much. Today is Parental Alienation Awareness Day. I think that we need more awareness at all level. But out of everything, the biggest thing is for you to take care of yourself, to be empowered. So whatever the situation that you are in, I know it's devastating, it's painful, but the first place is take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, your physical health, build your network around you, and never give up hope. So thank you so much, and I will see you guys again hopefully soon.